Hello, and welcome to Thank You for Your Service. My name is Tom Heiser, and I will again be your host. Today we have an interesting interview in so much as we're talking to two female veterans that served in the Army and in the Air Force. But which is also interesting is their spouses were career military. So even though they were not in service as such, they were still serving well past their initial enlistment. We have Donna Hack and we have Barb Smith. Thank you very much for your service, both of you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, get started. Start with you, Donna. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Green Bay. I grew up and graduated high school in Green Bay. And then from there, I went into the, right after graduation, I went into the Army.
Okay, just a regular enlistment, 2 years, 3 years?
2 years. 2-year enlistment I went, and I went into medical, so I went into because I was always interested in that.
Okay. Barb, where are you from?
Originally, I was born in Richmond, Virginia, and basically raised in upstate New York. And that's where I enlisted from, was in New York.
When you both ended up here in Wisconsin Rapids?
Yes.
Okay.
Big city.
Big city.
Okay, Barb, why the Air Force?
My cousins, both of my male cousins, had joined the Air Force. And it felt like the right fit. The recruiter and I got along. He was honest with me and got me into the career field I wanted. So that was the main reason.
Okay, and what field was that?
Personnel specialist.
Okay.
Worked in an office.
Why the Army, Donna?
My brother was in the Army. So he was in the Army when I enlisted. So I just, the medical field, I just thought I could get a lot of training and maybe move on from there. And after I got out.
Okay. Basic. Where'd you go for basic?
Fort McClellan, Alabama. Hot, hot, hot.
Summertime.
Oh my gosh, it was so hot. And, thinking back on it now, it's probably not like basic training like the women have now. I wished that we could have had the basic training like they have now, instead of all this playing that they had the women do. It was really, you walk, and march and go have what they call bivouac, where you go out and camp. And that's all we did, and march around there and went back to the base, and there really wasn't anything special about it, and I wished it were, at least learn how to fire a weapon, for target practice or something like that, but they didn't do that. And of course, when I went into the Army, I went in when it wasn't the thing to do at the time. I mean, not, because when I went in, they said, come on, in the Army, what are you doing that for? Well, that's what I wanted to do. I mean, some people went off to college, some of my schoolmates went off to college, some of them didn't do anything, they just stayed at their job that they had in town and hung out with their friends. I guess I was looking for something different, I grew up in the same town, lived at home, didn't really do too much. My father had a huge vegetable garden, which I worked in the fields a lot, in the field and taking care of that. But then my mother, she canned everything that my father grew, so we had a big family. I had 5 sisters and 3 brothers. So she canned and everything, or froze everything, and I learned a lot by watching my mother, so But I wanted to learn something else, besides the home stuff, you know. I just wanted to reach out and see what else the world was about.
So basic training, were all your DIs female, or were there some?
Female, yes, they're all female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basic training, Barb, where'd you go?
Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
In the summer or winter?
Actually, it was May, and it was pretty nice. Yeah, it wasn't too bad yet. But I agree with Donna. At the time that I enlisted, women weren't allowed to go to war.
Mm-mm.
And so we didn't have the training with the guns and the shooting and everything, and we didn't have to go through the obstacle course. But we did have to, you know, do the physical conditioning and run the mile and things like that. But it was a different world back then.
Right, yes, yes.
So political climate of the country was not real positive for
No.
veterans and or female
No,
veterans.
that's when I
Correct.
went in
Yes.
was just as Vietnam was heating up.
Yep.
You know, 'cause I went in July of 1964, right after I graduated, and that's when it was just, I guess the United States was really starting to get into it.
Yeah.
So,
I went in '75 and just caught the tail end of the GI Bill benefits for the Vietnam War.
So now you go to basic. And now, where did you go for AIT, Barb? Did you stay at Lackland, or did you go to somewhere else for your advanced training?
Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi.
So now we're getting into the warm weather time.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was very warm. But I don't know, I was younger then, I could handle it.
right.
And stayed there, you know, I don't remember how long I was there, 6 weeks, something like that.
Okay.
Going to personnel specialist school. And what I remember most about that was we were allowed to drink again.
So personnel specialist, that's kind of like human resources,
Yes.
as they would call it today.
Yes.
So your job in the Air Force was?
Working in the human resources office, typing up orders, updating records. I worked for, after training, I went to Washington, D.C. to Air Force Office of Special Investigations. And we handled all the records for all the enlisted, for all the agents, for all the officers. And updating in the computer, the old space bar computers, and the key punch machines. And
Let's say punch cards.
yes, uh-huh.
Where did you go for your advanced training?
Well, after I left the basic training, I was sent to Fort Sam, Houston for my medical training, for the medical training. I went there, and I really loved it there. I really liked it there. It was so, people, we would go around. I was still under the age of 21, so there really wasn't a lot I could do. I was still 18, you know. So you can't go anywhere, but when we go into town, they were so appreciative. I mean, already thanking me for my service, and I just started, you know, and to go to the store, and it was just so nice. I loved the base. I mean, I liked the people there. I mean, it was just wonderful. I enjoyed my training there. I mean, you did a whole gamut of medical training, food service stuff, you know, what not to do. I mean, some of the stuff that they showed, I didn't believe people actually did that, but but maybe they did, and that's where they got the idea to tell us, you know, that we don't do that, you know. And hospital training, medical training, it was a lot, you know, how to be taken care of other people with different problems, and how to deal with people with personality issues, how what to do and what not to do, what to say and what not to say. So
that was your training. Would that be like an LPN type of training?
Yes. Yes, we did all that kind of things. We had to practice drawing blood and giving injections and stuff like that.
So basic nursing training.
Correct.
Okay, but that was quite interesting.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And Barb, you mentioned your personnel training. A lot of stuff you handled was not public information. It was a lot of classified stuff, so you had to be very cautious.
True. True. And I made a few mistakes along the way. But we got past all of that, so.
Okay, so now you're done with school. Where's the first duty station that you had?
Washington, D.C., Bowling Air Force Base. And that was the base I lived on. And then we were bused into D.C. proper to the Forrestal building. And that's where the AFOSI offices were. And it was interesting. I really enjoyed it there. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I went back.
So you said, they bust you in.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting at that time. So you didn't have a lot of people going with their individual vehicles. You're into going as a group.
Yes. The married personnel, they generally got there themselves, but those of us in the barracks, we got the bus. And it was just easier. So.
Washington, D.C., interesting city.
Yes, yes. It's quite beautiful. It's a big city, and you can get lost and you can get in trouble. But it's just beautiful with the cherry blossoms and the monuments, and just I felt very privileged to be able to be there and see all that and partake of what it had to offer.
Okay, stepping back a little bit, Donna, when you first went in, you had family members that had been in service already. Were you nervous, scared when you went in, or now that you're away from this big family, but now you have this other big family called recruits?
Yeah, I really wasn't nervous. I noticed when we got into the barracks, it was a great big bay barracks, it was everybody. I don't know how many of us women were all in the same, just in different beds, single beds, all in a bay. I don't know, maybe 20, 30 of us or something like that. And the first night there, I was just laying there and I could hear the sniffling and everything.
Yes.
All of them were crying and everything, and I didn't really know what they were crying about, because I was glad to be away from home. I didn't know why they were crying. And there's one little thing that I really screwed up. The drill instructor was there, and I came back to the barracks or the bay that we were staying in, and someone had asked me to go back and tell the sergeant something, and of course I was new to all this slang, to the mess hall or something, and I couldn't remember what it was, so I said the dining room, and she said the dining room. And she was like all put out because I couldn't say mess hall, and I said, well, I was sorry, but it's all I could so I delivered the message, so she knew where it was.
Your first days in the military, Barb, apprehensive, nervous?
I was very excited to be doing it and to get away from home, but as I'm listening at night in bed to all these others crying, and of course I started thinking about Mom and my sister, and I started missing them a little bit. I didn't want to leave them. But I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it.
I did too, because it was a new experience
Yeah.
to put under my hat, you know, to say I didn't want to be one that lived at home my whole life and never, I mean, I had never traveled before anywhere. And this was all new to me, you know, to see
And you
another.
felt like you were contributing,
Right.
like you were doing something. And
Right,
you
just
were proud to be.
Doing something with my life other than just staying at home, you know. There's some of the classmates that I had, you know, they just graduated, got married, and had kids and all stayed at home, you know. It's just, that wasn't for me. I didn't want that. I mean, I had enough siblings to live around all my life, you know, and I wanted to see and do something different. Although I learned a lot at home and learned how to do a lot of things to take care of myself, I knew how to take care of myself. But I was very immature going into the military because there was a lot of things that I didn't know. And you got a first class lesson, you know, in life, you know, because you learned a lot of things about yourself, about how much you really don't know. And you thought you knew a lot, but of course, what kid doesn't?
You know, interesting concept. Both basically from not huge communities, but now all of a sudden you're with a bunch of people from all over.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
different cultures, the different
Right.
lifestyles.
And that's what I enjoyed most, because there were other people from other countries who were American citizens now, and they were there. And it was interesting to talk with them, to learn about their country and how they lived and everything, and their food, you know, especially food. You talk about food and how you prepared it, and to get to try different dishes from different countries, and just to learn how to, you know, how to fix it. That, you know, that part was very interesting, to meet other people from all over the world, all over different parts of the world. So,
Wake up experience.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
open your eyes.
Okay, so are you now at your permanent station, or did you go to different stations after?
I left Fort Sam Houston, and like Barb said, they went by bus. We ended up being stuck on a train. You know, we had to go by train, and I had to go by train, and I was the one that was supposed to be in charge of our group. But we went to, from my permanent duty station was Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Denver, Colorado. So, of course, everybody turned in all their travel vouchers and everything, and it was up to me to, and I'm trying to deal with the altitude. You know, I can't hardly stay awake. So some of the girls would come to me, have you turned in the voucher? I said, no, I haven't done it yet. So I had to, you know, get over there so everybody would get their money back, their travel vouchers, so they get their money. So, but it was way different in Denver than it was in Texas, you know. And to me, when I think back on it, it seemed so dreary. Because I don't know why. Maybe it was because like I said, I was immature. I was young. I was just so young. And there wasn't, you know, I made a couple of friends, and we would take rides, you know, around looking at the mountains and going to different little shops that were in the mountains, you know, just for something to do, and go to different stores to look around to see, you know, what. But the only place on the base where I could go would be like to the bowling alley, or a little a counter, like but you would have in a drugstore, you know, a counter where you can get hamburgers or little drinks and stuff like that. And that's where most of us went, because I think most of the women that I was with were all under the age of 21 and couldn't really do anything, so we just kind of hung out there.
So
And-
you became a tourist.
Yeah, that's about what we did.
Barb, same thing for you out in Washington DC, kind of tourist stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And you
I guess-
kept, you know, it was, once I had my own car at bowling, and I was able to get off base a lot, but basically I just hung out at the clubs on base. And on the weekends we would go sightseeing and doing things, and you form a bond with others, and you go out and you do stuff together.
Yeah.
It's
There was-
interesting, that bond that you formed was with people from Nevada, California, Florida,
Yeah.
all different parts of the country, but yet you have a common bond being in the service.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there was one time when I was in Colorado. It was me and this other girl, and this guy and this other girl who kind of were an item, so to speak. And they had the car, so we just went along for the ride. And on one of our rides, there was a sheriff or state trooper or something, had his light on, was behind us, and the guy that was driving said, "What the world is going on?" You know. So he pulled us over and he looked in the car and he said, "Oh, it's okay." He said, "You can go on." He said, "We thought that you were somebody that we were looking for." And you kind of, the automobile and the people in the car kind of fit the description. But he said, "Well, just go on ahead and enjoy your day." It was, you know, something that just got stopped because, so we had something to talk about for a while.
Hey, good friends?
Yes.
Stay in touch with them at all?
Not anymore, because I was only in for 2 years and they probably stayed in longer and did more things, and I was working on a hospital ward, and some of them were probably working in medical records or in different places, so we never really saw each other except at the barracks. You know, you go back to the barracks and sleep, and then everybody went their separate ways, you know, in the morning when you went to work. And it was winter at the time. It was pretty cold, and when I got off work, I'd have to work, you know, I worked different shifts, and especially when I got off on the night shift, I got off in the morning, I was so tired because, well, I'm still dealing with the altitude, you know, and that just makes you tired right there. And I'd get back into them. Of course, now we're not in the barracks anymore. We have a room, you know, that we share with another person. So there's 2 of us in a room. And I'd get and flop on my bed, and I'd be wearing my winter coat, and I'd just fall asleep. I'd be out. Of course, they did inspections every morning, you know, they went through, so they probably did the inspection around me, you know, so.
Were good friends when you were in service as well?
Yes. Still, I look at when you graduate from Lackland and go on to your tech school, and they give you a book with pictures, and it's like a yearbook. And a lot of girls signed it, and I was able to keep in touch with a lot of them for a while. But after you get married and you go your own way, you tend to lose track. So, but I do remember some of them very fondly.
Was social media as active as it is? Stay in touch with any of them on Facebook or anything?
You know, I haven't tried to reach any of them. I gotta admit. Well, I'm not a big. I like Facebook, but I'm also a little leery of it.
Right.
So I haven't really gone searching for a lot of people.
I don't remember a lot of their names, you know, like I said, I was only in for 2 years and then I got out, and so you just lose contact with them, so.
Mhm.
And,
So you're getting ready to get out.
mhm.
You're on a 2-year enlistment. Barb, you had
4 years.
4 years? Okay. So you're getting ready to get out. and you're in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come back to Wisconsin, or where do you go after Colorado?
I went back to Wisconsin.
Okay.
I did. And before I went in, that's when I met my husband. Before I went, when I was just going in on the enlistment in Milwaukee, that's where the state, processing place was, was in Milwaukee. And I met him at the USO Club. And I was trying to shoot pool.
Okay, how many stations did you go to, Barbara? Was TC your last one?
I actually only served at bowling for AFOSI. I got an early out and went into the reserves. I didn't handle the whole idea of going PCS very well. I was very nervous about being sent someplace else, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing at that time. Going through some personal things. And so I decided to go into the reserves, and I went back home to New York and served I can't remember where the station was. Doesn't matter. But I missed it so much that I went back to active duty for the Air Reserve Personnel Center. And so I was in a grand total of 5 years with active duty and reserve. And when I went back to bowling with the ARPC, that's when Will and I met each other and started to get to know each other. It's funny. Our story is that we lived in the first co-ed barracks in the Air Force. It was at Bowling Air Force Base, and it was a wing thing, an L-shape barracks. And the guys were on one wing, and the gals were on the other wing. And you had 2 rooms with a bathroom in between. And it's like a Motel 6, basically. And that's how we met each other, in the day room, playing cards, getting to know each other.
Okay, that's what you mentioned, and I'm glad you mentioned it also. So now you meet Will,
Mm-hmm.
and you start dating and things like that. Had Will been in for a while already, or was he on his first or second enlistment?
He is on his second enlistment. He had already been stationed at 2 other bases before that. He had been married and had a daughter and gotten a divorce. And he worked for the PMEL shop, the Precision Measurement Electronics equipment laboratory, I should say. And they were stationed on bowling. And they had their building there. And we got to know each other through the barracks and all. So he had been in a while.
Okay, so you kind of knew that there was a possibility that he could continue on and make this a career.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Tell us about Bill.
You probably know more about him than I do. Well, when we met, it was at the USO, and he came over, and we started shooting pool together. And then we just hung out a lot together before I had to leave, so when we started writing to each other. And what I found out later, that he was in Milwaukee, but he was supposed to be on a ship in Japan, and he was AWOL. I didn't. And this was his second enlistment, because he had first gotten out, and then he went to work at a foundry in Milwaukee. And he said, I'm not going to work here, because that was really, really hot work, and he didn't want to, so he re-enlisted. Well, he was supposed to be on a ship in Japan at the time, and he was in Milwaukee with me. So I guess after I left, the shore patrol came and got him and hauled him back. I guess he was in the, I think that he was in the, I don't quote me on this, but he might have had to go to the brig for a while because of him being AWOL. You know, it had to be, I mean, he was supposed to be way across the country, and here he was in Milwaukee.
And you just couldn't go across the parking lot and get out of ship and be okay.
No, no.
Okay, so
So-
you kind of know that he's going to be a career also.
Oh, yeah, because he talked about getting a job on the outside, and he said, no, that work is too hard. So he would rather be in the military, and why not? You know, he gets all the schools and training, and he would be there, and he was a gunner's mate, so he was on ships, and his first one was the second. He was on the second enlistment. He was on an LST. That's when they start shipping troops over to Vietnam. He was on an LST where the end flap would go down and they'd walk off the boat to the shore. So anyway, and he's been on destroyers and mostly destroyers after the LST. They don't even commission LSTs anymore. There is no more LSTs. So what they call the flat bottom boats, they don't do that anymore. So
when you met Bill, were you still in, or had you had gotten out already?
I had just gone in. I was just
okay.
going in when I met him. He'd been in, got out, and re-enlisted. So he was going back in when I met him. So, and then we would write. And then shortly before I got out, or after I got out, we got married. And he was on leave, and we got married.
Not AWOL.
Not AWOL. He wasn't AWOL that time. But we never went overseas. We tried, but never got there.
So you were still in when you met Will?
Yes. Hmm. And stationed with the Air Reserve Personnel Center. And we were again in the same barracks. And also, that's basically how we got to know each other, is playing cards with other friends and going to different parties that they would have in the day rooms, or just hanging out at home at the barracks.
So did you get married while you were still in, or?
I had just gotten out. I had just totally, completely gotten out, and we got married in May of 1980.
In what area?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C.
Everything happened there. And then soon after we got married, he got orders for England, for Upper Hayford in England. And we went over there and did a 3-year tour over there. And then we went to Then we went to Phoenix, Arizona, and his daughter came to live with us there in Phoenix. She was a teenager. That was interesting. But it was good. It was good. And then after Phoenix, Arizona, we went on up to Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska, and that's where he retired from.
So you got to see part of the world.
Yes, I was very blessed. Very
Yeah.
blessed. And my sister, when we talk about it, she's jealous of me because I was able to go and see all these things and do all these things. And before we retired, I tended to be a little jealous of her that she got to stay in one place and had all these friends, and she had roots, and which was something that I wanted.
Mm.
But we didn't really get that until we moved here to Wisconsin.
It's an interesting concept you talk about that. You're traveling a lot, which means packing, unpacking, finding housing, and moving.
Yeah.
But you're seeing a lot of world,
Mm-hmm.
and your sister is staying in one place, and the jealousy, it's actually both
Yeah.
ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like Barb, when we got married, I thought it was exciting,
Mm.
with Bill being in the Navy and moving and getting different places to live. But then after we started having kids, it wasn't so much fun anymore.
Yeah.
Because, after, it was years, after we were in. And it was hard moving to different places. It stopped being exciting anymore, because he would be getting transferred. I mean, the shortest stay we ever had was in Philadelphia. He was stationed on a ship in Philadelphia, and we were only there for 9 months.
Oh,
And
that's
then we
hard.
had to leave again, and it's just like, I can't, because it was like everything that you had, like curtains and everything, wouldn't fit the windows, so
Yeah,
then
that's
you would
right.
have to buy new curtains. Either you wouldn't have enough furniture or you had too much furniture, so you either had to get rid of some or buy some. And then when the kids started getting bigger and started having friends, it was hard on them too, because they were leaving again, and even my oldest son, he would say something about, he would tell me at school when he would be going to different schools. I mean, couldn't tell you how many different schools my oldest son went to. I mean, we would move so many times, and from one grade, he would finish in another, same grade in another school in another place, and it would go on and on. And I guess he would feel that these kids that he was going to school with were so immature.
Yeah.
I said, they are, Brian. They are. Because they've never had to do as you have done. They've never had to, at a moment's notice, start packing and moving and going to another place to live and going to another school and going to another state. And you had to adjust, adapt, adjust, and overcome, And the old military saying, that's what you did, but
Yes.
that's what they had to do from little on. And I think my daughter, she took it the hardest, It just really did not sit well with her. The boys, they kind of toughed it out. But I think it was really hard on my daughter. I mean, it was depressing for her to have to leave her friends, all her school friends and her neighborhood friends and all the people that she would have fun with. It was hard on her. She did not like it at all. And I think it's hard on, I thought it was hard on me, but I think it's harder on them because they're growing up and they're getting more mature. And they don't have lasting friendships, because they end. You get to know them real well, you have a good time with them, you have parties, and my kids had parties at our house all the time. They'd invite their friends and dance and have music and everything, and then pretty soon, it's over. Start over again, someplace else.
It's interesting, I've interviewed both your husbands, and the places they've been, you go, wow, that is really neat. You go here, you go there. And like you say, Will had a daughter,
Yes.
and you'll mention your daughter. It seems like the teenage daughters, try to have good bonding friendships, and then they're gone.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Tough for you too?
Well, it was a little different for Will and I. For most of our marriage, we've been what they call dinks, dual income, no kids. And it was just at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix that we had Ella living with us. And after she graduated from high school, she went back and was living with her mom. And then, of course, she got married herself and moved on. But so for her, the hard part was leaving her mom, coming to live with us, and then going back to her mom. And one of the reasons why she came along and came with us is because she has a disease called neurofibromatosis. And so she needed a lot of surgeries. And that's where you get tumors on your nerve endings. And so, kind of like elephant man's disease, but not really. So she had scoliosis. She needed surgery to put Harrington rods in her back to keep her spine as straight as possible, also to support it. And the military was the best way to do that. It was a lot less expensive. And we had good doctors and good nurses, and they took care of her, you know. So it was a hard. I think she came to live with us when she was 14, and she went back to her mom when she was 18. So it was a hard 4 years for her. And it was a little rough, because here she is, she's coming into a family with her dad and a stepmom, and she's having all these surgeries done. She's got all these new people she's meeting. And I've got to hand it to her. She did so well. When you think about it, she did so well. She made good friends in high school. She's still friends with all of them now. And that just amazes me, that she's been able to maintain this relationship with them since she was 14, 15 years old. And I'm just so proud of her, you know. It was hard for her and I too. Because here I am, I'm the big the big mean stepmom, you know, the Cinderella stepmom. But I wasn't really. And so, but with Will being gone TDY all the time on temporary duty to this school, this place, that place, we had to learn to get together and to rely on each other, and to know that we each had each other's back. So that was a learning experience, and we came out with a good relationship in the end.
Good. You talked about the TDY, and I wanted to touch on that. You know, temporary duty, where he could be gone for like 6 months.
Yes.
Now you're in charge of the house. You know, talk about that a little bit, because that's an interesting phenomenon, so to say.
It was very interesting, and I was already a little independent because I had been in the military myself, and I had to take care of myself. But when he would go and I would be in charge, it was just easy. You know, you do it, you don't know what you're doing. Luckily, I didn't have any major breakdowns in appliances or household things. So I was lucky that way. But when he is gone, you become much more independent, and you rely on your own thinking, your own opinions, your own knowledge and experience. And then when he comes back, of course he's a man. And he's in charge, and he knows he's in charge. And of course, in the military, he's in charge because he has leadership position there. So you clash a little bit, and you butt heads a little bit. But finally, I learned to back off a little bit, and he learns to give a little. So, but those were our hardest times, is the first few months when he was back.
Yeah. Well, unlike Barb, we are always on the East Coast, all on the East Coast, Maryland, Virginia, Rhode Island, Connecticut, you know, all around there. And when he would go on these cruises, they could be gone 9-10 months out of the year. And like Barb, you took care of things. By that time, I had 2 kids, my son and my daughter. So you take care of the kids, you take care of the house, you take care of the groceries, you take care of, you know, the car if you need to do anything, get the oil changed, whatever, and whatever you got to do. You take care of the meals, and everything, and
work full time.
Well, at that time I didn't have a job.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have a job because I would have to hire a babysitter, and at that time you didn't really make a whole lot of money. So, and if I did work, I'd be giving half or more than half to a babysitter. So I just didn't work. So the only time I did work was when Bill was home. My husband was home, so he would stay with the kids. But being gone. But then when he'd get back, then I'd be doing things, and he said, well, it's supposed to be done this way. I said, I've been doing it this way for almost a year while you were gone, and everything's fine. I said, I've been doing this, and it's been working out, and this is the way I'm going to do it, and it was just, like you said, button heads as to who's going to win out,
Yeah.
But after a while, the rough water settles down, and everything is copacetic, it's just okay. It's just them coming back, and they want to be a part of the family, but they want to be the boss of the family too. But you can't have it both ways. You do your work, you're in charge on the ship when you're there. Well, I'm in charge here.
Yeah, you miss them so much when they go away initially, and then when they come back, you're saying, don't you have another place you have to go?
That's what I did. I told my husband, it's just that he was just getting on my nerves someplace, and I said, isn't there a ship going somewhere that you can get on?
So now, as an example, he comes back from TDY, he comes back from a cruise, and now they get transferred. Now, did you guys spend a lot of time with military housing where you didn't really have to sell it or re-rent it, where you could move on, or how did that work when transfer came and you had to go to another duty station? You got a pack, and you got a building.
Right.
We did mostly military housing, but we had to live in certain places. We had to we had to rent a place until military housing was available. When we were transferred to Connecticut, we lived in a tent and a campgrounds for 1 solid month with 3 kids. And I did all the cooking on a fire. It was in the campgrounds. We stayed waiting for housing. And there was a pool there. Thank God. Because the kids had something to do. I mean, they were in the pool every day, all day long. There was the laundromat there. There were showers there. There was a little store there to stuff. But, I mean, we had 5 people living in a tent. And, as much as how terrible it sounds, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We had sleeping bags. We slept in sleeping bags on there, and it was fun. But when we got housing, I was really happy, though. I was really happy when we got housing. And we were in Groton, Connecticut at the time, and he was at it's a submarine base, but he was he was working, I guess, more or less shore duty at the time. He was working where the guys were in between duty stations, and he was there to make sure the flow went through pretty good. When they get there, he would send them on their way, and that's what he was doing there. But while I was there, I worked at a mini mart that was part of the base. It was a Navy Exchange mini mart, and I worked there. And while we were there, I didn't. I worked a couple of different places when I was there, but I think the kids. I think that's where, when we left Connecticut, that's when my daughter really, she hit rock bottom. Is when, because we were there for a while, and that's where she made most all of her friends. And it killed her to leave. She cried. She said, "I don't want to move." And I understand, but well, what are we going to do? We got to go. So it was hard on her. She she was like a preteen, She was not quite a teenager, not quite a child.
That is a hard age, yeah.
And
Definitely.
she had all her friends, and of course she had a crush on this one guy. She one of my son's friends. Oh, she was in love with them. And she had her friends there and her other girlfriends and everything, but she just didn't want to go. It was hard for us to pack and leave, and so, and then I think that's when we went to, I think we went to Philadelphia at the time. I can't remember. We had to move so many times, but that's when we were only there for 9 months. And I said, "Oh, we gotta go again." And insurance, car insurance, is astronomical in Philadelphia. Astronomical for a car. I worked a job only to pay car insurance. That's all my money went, was to the car insurance. It was the highest accident place in the country to live, and even though we were living on base, all my checks went to car insurance. It didn't help us any. I mean, the only thing it helped us with is the car insurance, because it was so high. So anyway, and he was on a ship there. Then we didn't stay there very long, which I was glad we left. And my son, my youngest son, almost was killed there. There was a chain link fence around the backyard, and in Philadelphia, and he loved his little Matchbox cars. And there was a big old tree, and had a little sandy area behind it. And he would be sitting there playing with his little Matchbox cars. He was not school age yet, so he was probably about 2 years old, 2.5. He was playing there, and he had gotten up to come in the house to ask me something, and while he had left there coming in the house, a car come off the highway, went right through the chain link fence right into the tree. And I said God was looking out for him. Because I couldn't believe it, because all of a sudden we heard a crash, and we looked, and there was a car in the backyard and went right through he had to be traveling really fast to go through the chain link fence like that. So
I don't know if you would call it fortunate or unfortunate, but we only really lived in base housing in England when we were at Upper Hayford, but we had to wait. We had to rent a place until such time as base housing came open. But in all of the other places, except for DC, of course, because we were in the barracks there, and then we lived downtown Suitland, Maryland, in a rental apartment until such time as we went to England. I enjoyed base housing, I really did, but we were there during the I can't remember, I'm sorry. It was a conflict. And on Upper Hayford, it's open. The Queens Highway goes through it, and so they can't really gate it off or close it in. So during this I'm so sorry that I can't remember which one it was, but what happened is that they had to put concertina wire along the sides of the highway. And it was really funny because the joke was, if someone really wanted to get one of us, all they had to do was just drive by and throw a bomb out, because the buildings were right there. Everything was very accessible and all. And we went into, I'm not sure what they call it in the Army, where the young troops go around and patrol and out with their M16s. That was a little scary. All these young kids walking around with M16s and not really knowing any more than we knew. And they were in charge of checking your ID and all, but they wouldn't let you get close enough to show them the ID. So, but that lasted for a little while, and then it was all over and all that disappeared. So, and then at the other bases, once we got out of England and we came home to Phoenix, we started buying homes as we moved. So that was a little easier because it was ours, you know. And we were fortunate in that we didn't have to move quite as often as Donna had to move.
Oh, yes.
And we usually got to spend at least 3 years in a place. So it was a lot easier. Also, we didn't, you know, except for in Phoenix, we didn't have any kids to worry about. So it was just Will and I, and of course, you know, we signed on for that deal. You know, it's not like we had kids that didn't sign on for it and had to go with it, you know. So
The longest duty station Bill was ever on, it was in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, we stayed in Virginia Beach first because, well, his ship was docked in Norfolk. So we stayed in, we rented a house for a year in Virginia Beach. And then when housing came available, we moved to housing in Norfolk. And we were there for 8 years. The longest place that we ever stayed. Yeah. That's where my youngest son was born.
That's a good place to stay, too.
Oh, I loved Virginia, too, you know, and my son was born in, at the hospital in Virginia. It just kind of lost. Well, he was born there, and I had prior to that when we lived in Maryland. I had a son too, but he died at 3 months. He was 3 months old when he died, and then when my the last son I had was born, he had breathing problems, and Portsmouth, Virginia, was a hospital up there, and he was having trouble breathing, and I was in the middle of the night, and I packed him up and put him in the car and took him to Portsmouth, because that's when you had to go through that tunnel to get to the other side. And I took him in there, and the doctor was asking me why was I bringing him in here. He said he's just, you know, he's a little croup or something like that, and I explained to him I had a son who was always coughing, and they couldn't find anything wrong with him when he was a baby, and he died, and he understood. And the doctor was very sympathetic. He said, no, nothing to worry about, Mom. He's going to be all right. He said, I understand where you're coming from. But he was okay, you know. And then being in the military affords the kids lots of opportunities.
Yes. Because
my oldest son, when we were in, I think it was, I don't know where it was now, Maryland? No, Connecticut, Groton, Connecticut. He joined, my oldest son joined Sea Cadets. And it was like being in the Navy, you know, they wore the uniforms and they did boot camp and all this other stuff. And when he went into the Navy right after high school, graduated high school. And I said, well, I didn't know you were going to the Navy. And he said, Mom, why do you think I went to Sea Cadets? And I said, well, I don't know. It's like, you know, like going to Boy Scouts, you know. And he said, no, I had every intention, because the ships, they had dependence cruises. I was on one, but then they would have a father and son cruise. And he would always go with his dad to those cruises. He loved it. And I think it was that really convinced him that he wanted to be in the Navy. So, and he was in the Navy for 27 years.
Wow. Anything you want to add, Barb? To wrap up a little bit here.
It was a different world back then. And it was the end of the Vietnam war. And it was a little hard to understand why people were so against
Yeah.
the guys serving, just because they were against us being there. That was a little hard. And then with Desert Storm and the Gulf War, and now all of a sudden the military guys are the best, and we've got to. But I think that came from the Vietnam War.
Right,
and the
I agree.
Korean War.
I agree with you, Barb.
Mhm.
I mean, people realized how awful they
Yes.
treated the guys in the military, all of them in the military who served during the Vietnam, and they treated them. It's stateside everywhere where they went. They were treated like garbage.
Yeah.
And I think, it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it. But after they realized, half of the stuff that they were being accused of never happened, and they were being treated so badly. And I think everybody had like an epiphany, it's just like, what would you do without your military, And then it was just, the pendulum swung way back to the other way. I'm glad to see where it is right now. I am really happy to see it where it is right now, that the military, retired or active duty, are very much appreciated now.
Yes.
Where they weren't
Yes.
before. They just were not before. And I think that from what I heard, I watched the American Heroes channel sometimes, and I think that after the Second World War, I think the guys, when they came back, were treated much of the same way. From what I gathered from what they told, that they were treated much like the Vietnam veterans were treated. So
People didn't understand back then that this affected them. The people that were there, the guys, the gals, that it wasn't a walk in the park.
No,
it wasn't
no.
something they wanted to go out and shoot people
right.
and kill people. That affected them. And they needed more help than they got.
Right, that's right.
But luckily now we are given the help.
Yeah. It took a long time, but they finally saw that there was a need there.
Mhm.
There was a need, and they needed to set up something for these guys to, or the girls, and that were coming back, and they needed help, really a lot of help. And at first it just wasn't there. And it's like everybody say, well, just suck it up,
Yeah.
Were you there?
Or you were a second-class citizen because you served. And I got that a little bit. Why in the world would you go and serve? Because I
Right,
believed
I
in
got
our
that.
country.
Why did
You
you
know?
even go in the army? What was? Why would you want to do that?
Yeah. But at the time, they thought that women went in to either find men.
Right.
I'm not sure what the other thing was. But
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't like that at all. It's just
yeah.
you just wanted an experience in life and do something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
And,
not.
I never had any problems with sexual harassment. They've got, that's a big thing going on right now with women being harassed, and especially like in tech schools or training. We didn't have that. I never experienced it. Maybe I was too dumb to know.
Yeah.
But it just kind of amazes me that it's hard to understand, I should say. Did you ever have it, Donna?
I hadn't noticed. Or like you said, maybe I was just too immature to even know
Yeah.
what was happening, But it really wasn't like that, just kept your nose to the grindstone and just
Yeah.
did what you have to do and do what you're supposed to do. And
You were there to do a job.
yeah,
And that's what we did.
And I think that with the kids growing up, being, what do they call them, Navy brats?
Yeah.
They are very mature kids. Because they've had to deal with a lot with their dad being away because he had to be someplace, and he had a responsibility to his family and to his country. So they learned responsibility, and they're all very responsible kids. My kids are very responsible, and they've taught their kids responsibility.
Yeah.
Of course, the two boys are in the military. They have military, so they have kids. So the kids are born in military families and responsible. And when my youngest son was in Afghanistan, he had to do 2 tours in Afghanistan, and his son at the time was small when he went back at the second time. When he came back, his son was having difficulty with his dad being gone again. And my son told me, he said it almost broke his heart when his son told him, "Dad, I didn't think you liked us anymore, that you kept going away." And he said that just broke his heart, that his son, the whole time that he was gone, was thinking that his dad didn't like him anymore, and that's why he was gone. And I imagine a lot of kids in Afghanistan and Iraq who had served, dads and moms served, I think they took it hard too when they were gone. And when you're little, you can't distinguish, why is my dad gone? Why is my mom gone? And then they come up with their own ideas of why. So my youngest son was offered OCS when he got out, when he was getting ready to go out, because he was sergeant major at the time. He turned it down. He said no. And they said, why not? You know, he knew that he was going to have to go back to Afghanistan if he took it, and he didn't want to because he said, I have my kids. I want to be there when my kids graduate high school. I don't want to be gone. I want to see my kids grow up. And he just didn't accept any of it, and he said, no, I'm getting out anyway. So, and it was, I hadn't realized, but when he told me that, his son thought that he just didn't like him anymore. That's why he was gone.
Ladies, this has been a learning experience. This is a heck of an opportunity. I really, really appreciate you guys coming here, and I also appreciate you for your service, your personal service, and your family service. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And thank you very much for watching.